Ben Lloyd, President of the Board of Directors of the Harford Land Trust, and on behalf of our board, I'd like to welcome you to our 2021 annual meeting. A little different this year, but before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping announcements. First is that during the meeting, please use the chat feature to submit your questions if you have any for our panelists. Sarah Hummer, our Outreach and Administration Coordinator, will be monitoring the chat box for questions. Also, if you're unable to view the presentation or need to leave early, we'll have the full meeting recorded and uploaded to YouTube a little bit later. So you can watch it again, or you can catch the parts you missed, pass it along to folks that maybe might be interested to see it. We'll be distributing that link next week via email, so keep an eye out. So as I said, I'm Ben Lloyd, President of the Harford Land Trust. Just a little bit about me for those that I haven't yet met. I know we have a lot of new people on here today, and that's great. I've been on the board since 2008 and have served as president since 2014. I'm proud to be a 9th generation Harford County resident, currently living in the Narsville area near beautiful Deer Creek with my wife Calla and our 5-year-old son Evan. I grew up in Churchville, where I worked on area farms starting as a teenager and continuing through college and grad school. And on these farms, I gained an appreciation of the bounty that the land provides and picked up a strong work ethic and a lot of common sense from the farmers I worked for. When I think back on those farmers, I'm reminded of the saying that you can't plow a field by turning it over in your mind. This is the mindset that drives the Harford Land Trust. We don't just talk about saving land or petition others to do so. We roll up our sleeves and do it. I support the Harford Land Trust for many reasons, but primarily because I want to make sure that the Harford County my son grows up in looks as much as possible like the one I grew up in and the one my parents and grandparents grew up in, where irreplaceable view sheds, natural features, historic landmarks, and wildlife habitats are protected, with a vibrant agricultural economy, strong communities, and a rural way of life. But for every preservation success that we celebrate, there is the property that slipped through the cracks and got developed. It's for that reason that we are committed as an organization to growing our reach and leveraging our resources to the greatest extent possible so that we can do the most good and make a positive impact. You join us this morning during extraordinary times, to say the least. Without dwelling on all the bad news we've faced over the last 12 months, let's focus on the good and be thankful that the last year has been one of the most successful in our 30-year history in terms of preserving land for future generations. With our federal, state, and local partners, we completed the acquisition of a landmark property with agricultural and historical significance, boasting a mile of Chesapeake Bay shoreline. We laid the groundwork for the acquisition of another property that was just recently finalized and is the largest property we've ever preserved. We worked with numerous landowners to allow them to see their preservation goals become a reality. We grew our board and added staff to help manage our rapidly growing slate of projects and programs. And against strong headwinds, we finished the year in a good place financially and organizationally. Last year was a good one for the Harford Land Trust, and that is thanks to you, our ardent supporters. 2021 will be the 8th of my term as president, and I'm immensely proud of all the HLT has accomplished over that time. And I'm excited of what is to come in the years ahead. We've grown in stature as an organization, and when we speak, and more importantly act, people take note. We've expanded our outreach efforts and grown our support base among the county's citizens, businesses, and communities. We've accelerated the pace of our land projects and forged new partnerships. Most importantly, we've preserved some ecologically and historically irreplaceable properties. None of those successes are down to me. First and foremost, it's thanks to our exceptional executive director, our growing office staff, and our core of volunteers. But it's also thanks to our members, sponsors, and supporters who are like the wind in the sails of our organization, who keep us moving forward. Just as I was able to build on the success of presidents and board members before me, I know that those who come after me will do the same, and the future of our organization is bright. So as this will be my 8th year as president, I've decided that I'll be following on in the Washingtonian tradition of presidential succession and stepping aside after this year. It's my intention in announcing this now to allow for a year of transition and succession planning so that we don't miss a beat as an organization. To that end, I'm pleased to announce that the board has nominated Attorney Mcknight to serve as the vice president and my designated successor as president for next year. Attorney was one of the HLT's earliest board members and is by some distance the longest serving board member in our history. He's a retired attorney who tends to his beef cattle farm on Hartford Creamery Road. He serves as president of the Sumner T. Mcknight Foundation and is a past trustee on the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Some of his other titles include father, horseman, waterman, bluegrass guitar player, and author. I have no doubt that the HLT will be in safe hands with Attorney at the helm, and I thank him for his willingness to serve. Of course, I'm always going to be willing to help, and I'm happy to stay on the board for as long as the other board members choose to tolerate me. So with that, the slate of officers for this year are myself as president, Attorney Mcknight as vice president, Joe Tyson as secretary, and Mike Zeller as treasurer. I want to thank them all for their willingness to serve and for the significant amount of time they put in on behalf of the organization. I also want to thank board member Diane Jones, who answered the call to serve as vice president for the last 5+ years and did a great job. She was graciously willing to step aside to allow for our succession planning, and I want to thank her for that. I'd also like to make a plug for folks to get more involved. We're always looking for new volunteers, committee members, and potential board members. So if this sounds like you, please reach out to us. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our treasurer, Mike Zeller, for the financial update.
Good morning, everybody. So I get the opportunity to share some highlights with everybody here financially for Hartford Land Trust in 2020. The place I'll start is on the balance sheet side of everything. Our assets in 2020 remain relatively stable from the previous year. We have approximately $4 million worth of assets, of which 65% total is land. Of the $4 million worth of assets that we do hold, $540,000 is set aside for land projects in the future. What's notable about 2020 in the Hageman Land Fund is that we saw approximately a 10% increase from the previous year. On capital expenditures, we have our highlight here with Diverting Proving Ground, one of our major partners. We've received approximately $750,000 worth of funding for our work in the southern portion of the county. On operations, our operating budget, we had planned for in 2019 for a different year than we got. However, through careful planning and execution, our ordinary income was 12% higher than what we had planned for in 2019. At the same time, our ordinary expenses were 7% below what we had expected. Okay, so where did our funding come from in 2020? Well, the largest portion of our funding did come from grants, and a large portion of the grants that we received were dedicated to our land projects. Some of the other grant funding we did get went to stewardship and specifically a new website update from our staffer, Sarah. Highlighting here are gifts and membership of approximately $35,000. This is what's notable about gifts and membership in 2020 is the 50% increase in the membership drive we saw over 2019. Events, even in COVID, we were able to procure approximately $47,000 worth of funding to pursue our mission, which is great. And the balance of our sources of funding in 2020, the majority came from investments. What's notable about our investments in 2020 is that we did not have to liquidate any of these to support our operations. Okay, so how did we divert our funding? Well, the majority of that, again, went to land and easement purchases, which is a testament to the banner year Hartford Land Trust did have. We spent approximately $290,000 on programming, $10,000 on management and general expenses, the balance left to fundraising efforts. What's important to note about this is the majority of our grant funding, while it was the majority of the funds that we were able to source in 2020, those all go to specific areas for specific projects. Everything that we do to move the organization forward is funded largely in part by contributors like you. 2020 was not an easy time to navigate for many nonprofit organizations, but Hartford Land Trust had a banner year. And that is a testament to the support that we get from members like you. So sincere thanks on behalf of everybody at Hartford Land Trust for 2020.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kristen Kirkwood, the Executive Director of the Hartford Land Trust. It's my absolute pleasure to speak with you this morning. At our annual meetings, we normally have a guest speaker, but hopefully you'll forgive us because this year we had so many exciting things happen. We decided we'd take the whole annual meeting just to talk about what's been going on at Hartford Land Trust. Especially for those of us who work at Hartford Land Trust day in and day out, the past 12 months were equal parts thrilling, daunting, they were inspiring at times, and frankly, they were quite a bit exhausting. We completed more land transactions and preserved more acreage than any other year in our history. Many of these projects were years in the making, but they all seemed to come to fruition in 2020. First and foremost, Hartford Land Trust is powered by people. This has been sort of our superpower for the past 30 years, and it really continues to be what makes the organization so effective. We welcomed 3 new board members over the past 18 months. Dr. Jean Sisk, who grew up in Bel Air and now lives on Windmill Hill Farm in Havre de Grace, joined in late 2019. She currently works as a biologist at the FDA in the Center for Veterinary Medicine. Deborah Bowers of Street also joined us in 2020. She brings a wealth of knowledge to HLT and has spent most of her career as a land preservation practitioner. Deb also co-authored the book, Holding Our Ground, Protecting America's Farms and Farmlands, which I know has been quite a Bible for many of us in the land trust community over the years. Scott Kirby of Churchville recently retired as the county's Deputy Director of Public Works, following an impressive career with the Army and National Guard. He has a lot of experience in land management and restoration, which we're definitely starting to tap into already. Near and dear to my heart are our 2 new staff members that joined in the past year. Sarah Hummer, who's a Norrisville native, is our Outreach and Administration Coordinator. She is the brains behind all of our public communication and events and has been putting together wonderful outreach material, including this slide deck, all of our newsletters, our new website, and lots of other exciting new things for us. Jackie Kane joined just a few months ago as our land manager. She has an impressive natural resource management background and will be overseeing easement monitoring and land management and increasingly becoming involved in our land protection projects as well. Our volunteers, though, really went above and beyond this year. While we couldn't be together in person, so many people found ways to help us with land monitoring, virtual events, fundraising, and outreach. And I also just really want to send a heartfelt thanks to all of those members and volunteers that found time to just reach out, send us an encouraging email, a quick phone call, comment on a social media post. All of that really matters. When we can't see you directly in person, it's good to touch all of you and reach you in some way. Now for the numbers. We preserved 440 acres and monitored 1,891 acres in 2020. That might not seem like a lot or be a little bit hard to put in context, but trust me, it is a lot. Our county is a highly fragmented place with many 20 or 50 acre properties, and it takes a lot of willing landowners and a lot of time to stitch together this many properties to achieve numbers like this. But before I jump into the details of all of these properties from 2020, I wanted to step back and take a moment to explain Harford Land Trust's mission and preservation model. A lot of you on this webinar today are familiar faces, but some of you I see here are new as well. So our mission, which is the same as it was in 1991 when we were founded, is to preserve Harford County's natural resources and open space. Our projects are really straightforward. There are often many twists and turns along the way that calls for flexibility and ingenuity, and above all, a lot of time and resources. Land is not cheap in Harford County or in Maryland in general. Most of the time, but not always, a landowner approaches us. We start by talking about their property and their goals. Do they want to sell the property or maybe want to ensure that it passes on to heirs? Can they afford to preserve their land? When is the right time for them? Then we assess whether the property is a good conservation candidate. Is it productive farmland or maybe a forest or meadow? Does it have a waterway or floodplain? Is it sensitive habitat or important for stormwater management? How big is it? And is it adjacent to other preserved properties? And the most important question for us, is it in the public interest for it to be preserved? And by this, I don't mean public access, but is it important for the future of Harford County to permanently set aside this land? That's a question we take really seriously and think about it deeply for each of the projects that we commit to. A lot of this research is aided by maps and databases. We have a strategic land conservation plan where we can look up all properties in the county and assess them against some of these criteria. But we do also always get on the ground and visit these properties multiple times, combing over them, walking each corner before we move ahead. Once we know that the landowner is willing and interested and the property is a good conservation candidate, we then work to bring the right preservation model to the table. Sometimes this can happen in 6 months or a year, and sometimes in the case of one of the projects I'll talk about next, it can take decades. In September, we completed the preservation of Bellevue Farm, a 347-acre property on Oakington Peninsula, just outside of Havre de Grace. Some of you that are our members have probably heard us talk about this a lot, and you're going to definitely hear us continue to talk about this for years to come. That's just how proud we are of this. This effort to protect this beautiful property spanned nearly 3 decades. It's a significant win for all of Harford County, but it's really Harford Land Trust members that should feel especially proud of this achievement, as your support over the years is what made it possible for us to continue to make communications and contact with this family and ultimately partner with our county, our state, and Aberdeen Proving Ground to see this to a success. We purchased this property from the Davis family, who'd owned that since 1661. In addition to it being incredibly historic, as Ben said, there's almost 1 mile of Chesapeake Bay coastline. This is particularly notable as most of our bay coastline is within Aberdeen Proving Ground and therefore not accessible to the public. The preservation of this property expands the public lands on Oakington Peninsula to over 1,200 acres. While it's not yet open to the public, we're really, really excited to find opportunities for all of you to get out on that property. As I said, not only is it incredibly historic, but it includes 200 acres of some of Harford County's best agricultural land. And it definitely rivals many of the properties in the county, including Swan Harbor next door for its ecological richness. It's really hard to understand how beautiful this property is until you see it. So I'll now play a short clip, about 30 seconds of some aerial footage of the property. that video is that we received that aerial footage from the realtor contracted to market that property for development. So right after that beautiful aerial footage, the property is superimposed with a business park, with a large residential community, and with warehouses to show you what could have been built there. And we are so pleased that that will never happen. They were gracious enough to allow us to use that clip, but it's pretty shocking when you watch it in its entirety. And as I said, we'll sort of treasure that video because of the irony that we were able to stop some of those things from coming to be, and it will forever be a property in the public domain. Now under our conservation easements. We completed 3 conservation easement projects in 2020. Conservation easements are our primary method of preserving land, whereby the land stays in private ownership without public access. All 3 of these landowners approached Harford Land Trust and ultimately donated the easements, meaning that no money changed hands. In many ways, my favorite transactions are with landowners who donate conservation easements, as really they're not looking for cash, but they sincerely want to protect their property for the future. It's such a pleasure to work with landowners that share Harford Land Trust's mission. First, the lesser property is off of West Jarrettsville Road in Coopstown. It's a lovely homestead with forest and meadow. And following this transaction, we had a pretty lively discussion with the public on social media about whether or not Coopstown has an S. I maintain that it does, but you can put your own 2 cents in the chat if you disagree. The Thompson's Newwood Farm off 155 in Havre de Grace has many acres of pasture as well as forest, including a Susquehanna River tributary. This was especially meaningful as the landowner is in her 90s and the preservation of her beautiful property was really, really important to her in her later years. The Guercio property is off High Point Road in Forest Hill and has some of the steepest slopes of any property leading into Winter's Run. Most of the property is forested and it provides critical stream buffer and habitat. Even though it's only 22 acres, whenever I walk on this property, I certainly leave huffing and puffing because of the slopes and the difficulty to get down to Winter's Run. This past year has really put a spotlight on our need as human beings for open space. So many people have turned to parks and open spaces, many people for the first time, or perhaps they're rediscovering it later in life. We don't expect this to diminish. Park visitation across Maryland was up 45% last year, and this is pretty consistent with Harford County as well. Similarly, residents sought out local farmers, attended farmers markets, subscribed to a CSA for the first time, and really began to understand the importance of having farms and agricultural community living right next to them. Harford Land Trust and the larger conservation movement really wants to shout this from the mountaintops. It's the same message that we've been pushing for 30 years, and we know that we need more preserved land. We're so pleased to report a significant increase in donors and memberships this past year, and many of these new faces were drawn in by our virtual events. We started the Harford 2020 Challenge over the summer, in which we encouraged people to cover 20 miles on land or water in the county, and that was a huge hit. With the support of the Ben Boniface Memorial Foundation, we were able to kick off this new event that really exceeded our expectations. We had well over 200 participants, many of them families, and a lot of new people. We replaced our Harvest Moon dinner and auction with Harford Harvest, a virtual campaign to raise funds and awareness for farmland preservation and food security. Half of the proceeds went to Harford Community Action Agency and the Mason-Dixon Community Services, the 2 largest food bank distributors in our county. The proceeds went specifically to purchase food for those in need over this winter and fall. As you would expect, their need for emergency food services has skyrocketed since last March and continues to remain high. We're really pleased to report that this initiative led to some new relationships, specifically for Harford Community Action Agency based in Edgewood, with local producers and farmers. They were getting some produce in the summer from producers, but now also are working on ground beef and eggs produced locally to deliver to those in need in the county. We also really stepped up our digital outreach. Since we couldn't see people in person, whether at Harford Land Trust or other community events, we decided we would start a new Instagram page. We also have a YouTube channel now. And with the addition of Sarah Hummer to our staff, we also increased our direct mail, our newsletter publications, and our social media presence in general. If you're not on our e-news listserv already, I certainly encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, which we send out once a month. Also, do sign up for all those social media accounts that I just mentioned. This January, we launched a new website following months and months of work. A grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust enabled us to really commit to this project, which is now a hub for all of our public communications. The new website is full of vibrant photos from local photographers that were so generous to share their photos with us. And there's lots of information about our history, our team, landowner stories, and our impact of the work we do. We know it's not just on the environment, but it also impacts our economy and our overall quality of life. The website includes resources for landowners and the general public, including how to get involved and support Harford Land Trust's work. If you haven't looked at this new website already, I really suggest you take a few minutes and visit harfordlandtrust.org. I'll now turn it over to Ben for our next part of the agenda, which is our awards.
Stop. All right. Okay. So now we're gonna get to the point when we give our awards that we do every year. Every year we present our conservation award and our volunteer award to folks who exemplify the conservation ideals that we champion as an organization and folks who help us behind the scenes in achieving our goals. So in preparing for our annual meeting last year, before it was derailed by the pandemic, our board unanimously and enthusiastically chose to honor our longtime supporter, Larson R. Sayer, with our Conservation Award. Larson has been a champion of farmland preservation, soil conservation, and innovative farming practices in Harford County for decades. Over the years, Larson served on numerous local, state, and national boards related to agriculture and the environment. He's been a supporter of the Harford Land Trust since its founding in 1991, and he placed his family's Waffle Hill Farm in the county's Ag Land Preservation Program in 1997. Over the summer, I presented him with his award at his farm in Churchville, where he's raised Angus beef for many decades. He was joined by his son Laurie and daughters Sally and Nancy Ann, and we shared fond memories of his late wife Jane and son Ned. I was lucky enough to grow up next door to the Sayer family's farm and spend a lot of time there in my youth. Mr. Sayer was an early source of wisdom and inspiration to me, as he's been to so many others in our county on matters related to preservation and conservation. In accepting the award, Larson recalled the early years of the HLT, and in particular, the organization's first president, the late Johnston Hegeman. He also noted the support and commitment to land preservation made by his children and grandchildren, as preservation is as much about future generations as it is about those working the land today. So once again, congratulations to Larson Sayer, and we thank you for your ongoing support. And now I'll turn it back over to Kristen for the volunteer award.
Thanks, Ben. It's my pleasure to honor Cindy Fitzhugh with our volunteer award. As Ben said, just like Larson, we awarded this to Cindy last year, but weren't able to really celebrate her or talk about her at our annual meeting as it was canceled last year. Cindy and her husband Taylor live in Pilesville, right near Eden Mill and Kilgore Falls, and they manage Taylor Built Homes, a Harford County custom home build and design company. Cindy has become a leading contributor to our annual Harvest Moon Dinner and Auction. Her enthusiasm, creativity, and strong Harford County network helped HLT recognize record attendance and proceeds at the event in 2018 and 2019. She was also involved in our virtual fundraising events this year. She's the granddaughter of both a farmer and someone who owned an orchard. Cindy has always had a strong connection to nature because of that. She believes that home construction can happen alongside land preservation and has played an important role in helping HLT reach out to new businesses and individuals that share that vision. As most of you know, Harford Land Trust is certainly not an anti-development organization. There are the right places to put houses, and there are the right places to preserve natural resources and open space. And Cindy certainly embodies this vision that we have, and it's been such a pleasure to work with her if she can share that message with other businesses in the community. Thank you, Cindy, for all you do for Harford Land Trust and the community. So 2021 is Harford Land Trust's 30th anniversary. Peter Jay, one of our founders, wrote a wonderful piece reflecting back on the early days of HLT, which is posted on our website. For those of you who hadn't had a chance to read it, I really encourage you to do so. I also had the chance to speak with Peter Hageman, the son of John Hageman, the one who first founded the organization and had the idea to have a local land preservation organization in Harford County. It was such a pleasure to meet with Peter to hear about his dad's vision and what he thinks he would have thought today if he could see how far we've come. It was fascinating for me to go on this bit of an exploratory mission, talking to different people in preparation for our anniversary. It was really just a group of citizens who were tired of not being able to see change happen and to really use their voice in an effective way to preserve those natural resources. So they said, we're not going to write letters to the editor anymore. We're not just going to use our voice. We're going to use action. So they said, we'll get down to business. We're going to start an organization in the model of the Nature Conservancy, who by that time was well known and doing great things across the nation. And we're just going to start an organization to stop talking and to take action. And as Ben said in his opening remarks, that still remained an important value for the organization. I'd really like to think that the founders were pretty proud of how far we've come in 30 years. But we can't think of a better way to celebrate than to just keep preserving land. So during the first months of this year, we've already completed 3 projects totaling over 1,000 acres. That's right, 1,000 acres. We thought last year was our big year, but 2021 is certainly even bigger. A lot of this, again, was years and years in the making, but we're so pleased that we were able to complete a few of these. These include, again, both private easements and another hallmark project, which we're now calling the Grays Run Tract of Stony Demonstration Forest, in which we preserved 905 acres. That was a project in which we again collaborated with our partners at Aberdeen Proving Ground and also the state of Maryland. Some of you know that we did have a state forest known as Stony Demonstration Forest on Nova Scotia Road in Cresswell. This new piece of 905 acres is a beautiful hardwood forest that's not adjacent, it's just down the road a bit on Carson's Run. But for years and for decades, it had really been written off as just being on the chopping block for development. There were various proposals over the years to develop it. And while we always kept our eye on it, it always seemed out of reach. And when an interesting window of opportunity opened about 2.5 years ago, we immediately mobilized and were able to work tirelessly to buy it out of a bankruptcy process. That was the first time Harford Land Trust had ever taken something on so complex. And we were really thrilled to be able to work with the Conservation Fund, which is a national conservation organization specializing in these sorts of complex transactions. So this was settled in January, and it's now going to be managed by the Forest Service. So the former piece of Stony Demonstration Forest will now be called the James Run Tract, with this new piece, the Grays Run Tract, as Grays Run cuts through the center of the property. It's also bordered on the south side by 95, and as I said, the north side by Carson's Run. In addition to all this exciting land preservation work, we're continuing to care for those lands that we have in our ownership, as well as our conservation easements. And with the addition of Jackie, our new land manager, we're excited to be able to spend more time on those properties that we own in particular. We've recently received a grant to do some work on our Perryman Woods project and have already scheduled some cleanup days and some engagement with the community there. Also, we're working hard to develop a suite of events that get people outside this year. We still know that it'll be some time before we can meet together in person, but we're really excited to have another outdoor do-it-yourself event coming called Passport for Preservation in May. And we're also looking to find some way to still host our annual kayak poker run, perhaps in a modified form if that's what needs to happen over the summer. And we're also looking for a way to get people together outdoors safely in the fall instead of having our traditional indoor Harvest Moon dinner and auction. All of this is possible because of members and supporters like you. Please, if you are not a member already and you're watching, I really encourage you to go to our website and find a way to get involved. If you love what you're hearing and you're already a member, please spread the word to friends and family or other people that you know in the community. All of this great work is only because of the support of people like you. So we're looking to you to help us spread that message far and wide. Also, if you know of any properties that you have questions about or want to point any landowners our way, a lot of our work comes from those sorts of recommendations and connections. I'll now show a short video, about 60 seconds, of our new Stony Forest property before we conclude this presentation and open up for questions. With that, I'd like to thank you all so much for joining in today. We said we'd keep it under an hour, and we definitely did, but we've also left plenty of time for questions. So Sarah is manning the chat right now, so I would encourage all of you to go ahead and put any questions or even comments that you have in the chat, which Sarah will read out to Mike, Ben, and me, and we'll definitely answer that. If you'd like any more information about some of our specific projects or have questions about other things going on with land preservation in the county, we'd also be happy to entertain those questions or anything else we haven't touched on today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everybody back on.
It doesn't look like we have any questions so far. Hopefully everyone's able to find the chat function, and like Kristen said, if you prefer to email us questions right now or anytime really, we are always happy to answer questions. Tell us more about the May event.
Oh, sure. I can talk a little bit about that, and Sarah, please chime in as well.
Sure.
So our Hartford 2020 challenge, which we did in August, was such a hit. I think we learned that there's lots of people that just want to explore on their own time rather than coming to a large group event. So Passport to Preservation is something in May that'll run for the whole month. So we pulled together 31 different outdoor activities in the county for the 31 days of the month. And each of those activities also comes with hyperlinks to give you guides or more information on how to do that. So whether it's looking for wildflowers in Susquehanna State Park, and you get a wildflower guide for the area with that, or it's a trail map to go with a specific area that we're encouraging you to go to, or maybe it's just bird watching somewhere and you want a guide for that. All that information is in our Passport to Preservation. As it's 2021, we're trying to encourage everybody to do 21 of those events, but it's really up to the participants to decide how many they want to engage in. We also do have a junior version, so a junior passport with some kid-specific activities, again, with resources that go with it. So you can do it with your family or your siblings as well. And all of the participants will get a Hartford Land Trust branded, reusable, nice aluminum water bottle. And we also have some information for, or a button, I should say, for the kids, for our junior explorers. We've got a lot of good sponsors already signed up for that. So we're really hoping to push that far and wide, and maybe even do some photo competitions or some other prizes for participants. I think by May, everyone's gonna really wanna get outside and be sort of chomping at the bit for some spring weather.
Great. It looks like we have a question. Do we know whether any other parcels next to Stony Forest will be available to preserve? Great
question. I see it's coming from Deb. Yes, there are other properties which we would deem good conservation candidates. As I said, this is all in the Cresswell area, which was once a very large stony forest area. Some of these that remain forested are really because they were too rocky to ever be tilled. Not to say they're all virgin forest, but there is a surprising amount of forest left there. So there is, I would say, a handful of properties and landowners that we've proactively reached out to. Many of them, like you'll often hear across the county, are very conservation minded and don't want to see it developed, but perhaps they're not ready to take a big step at this time. So as we always do, we'd like to develop some relationships and cultivate them over time. But yes, is the answer to your question. We have some ambitions to continue to expand that, and especially to connect some of the pieces of the two portions right now. There's also, I think, at least one property that is adjacent to the new Grays Run tract that has entered into our county's ag land preservation program. So I should say that we don't just do this work in isolation. We talk very, very closely with our state and local partners who are also preserving land. And sometimes when we're looking at an area like Cresswell, where we're looking at it at a larger landscape level, we're talking to each other about which programs would best serve the goals of each landowner, and then working together to kind of stitch pieces through these different programs.
Great. We have another question about finding a way for members to see Bellevue and what plans might be in the works for that.
Ben, do you want to answer that one, or should I?
I'll just say that I know that the county is currently looking to do a comprehensive planning for the entire Oakington Peninsula because the county doesn't just own Bellevue, but it also owns a significant amount of acreage down there, close to 1,000 acres, I believe. So it's it's going to be part of a comprehensive strategy. I think the long-term plan is for public access with trails, canoe kayak launch, etc. Certainly the community and Harford Land Trust will be part of that planning process. Kristen, if you have anything to add.
Sure. Well, I'll speak for Harford Land Trust and not the county, which is now the owner of this property, but we are looking for some creative ways that we could try to get some of our members out on that property in a safe and kind of organized way. One of the reasons it's not open to the public now is that there are some old farm buildings and barns on the property, which have really been falling down over the years. So it's certainly not safe for everyone to walk around right now. But I think we might have some opportunities, like I said, in a sort of controlled and maybe, I guess, pre-scheduled sort of way to do that. I have been asked this by some of our members. If, for example, you're doing certain scientific research or, for example, the Breeding Bird Atlas with the Harford Bird Club is going on right now, the county is very amenable to allowing certain individuals for specific limited purposes on the property. So I would encourage you to either contact us or contact Parks and Rec, and we'd be happy to help facilitate that for anyone that has sort of a good bona fide reason to get on there now. But otherwise, please look out for some opportunities through us in the coming year, I'd say.
Great, and we have two more questions about related to this new Stony Forest property. So one of them was regarding if hunting would be available, and another about parking areas with public access to the Grays Run tract.
Sure. On the hunting, so the existing James Run tract is part of the Department of Natural Resources managed hunting program. And my understanding from just talking to them this week is that they expect to open up the new Grays Run tract for that program as well. That is a lottery system for white-tailed deer. And so all of that information is on the Department of Natural Resources website. And there are also some phone numbers for points of contact, so you could perhaps inquire if that will be available for the next hunting season. But yes, it will be. And the other question was on parking. So very good question, because right now there is no parking on that property. And I just spoke, I think it was on Thursday, with Rob Felt, who is the Central Forester for Maryland and will be leading management of that. And that's one of their first management actions. They're looking to identify a place to create at least one small parking area, perhaps a larger one later. They recognize people really want to get out on that property, and without illegally parking right now, you can't do that. Carson's Run is a fairly busy road, so I would not encourage anyone to park along the side of the road. Right now, what you might do is see if you have a family member or friend who can perhaps drop you off and pick you up along there because there is no public parking. But we have just organized a day where we will have parking available, which is going to be March 27th. That's a Saturday. In the morning, we're going to do an organized cleanup of that property. So that's a great way to do some service to the community and also have a bit of a sneak peek on that property. It has been sort of managed from afar, but for years, we'll say. So as you would expect with land that large, some people have used it as reason to throw out their roadside trash and things like that. So we're going to work with the Forest Service to have volunteers get out there and do a cleanup. We'll require registration for that because of COVID protocols. So do look out on our website and emails and social media as we post the registration for that day on March 27th. Sarah, I see a few comments in the chat. Do you want me to read any of those out?
Sure.
Okay, I'm just going to go to the top here so we don't miss some of those. Chad Schroeds is on, our councilman for the Northern Hartford County, and he just wanted to congratulate Hartford Land Trust on our 30th anniversary and the work we've done last year. He notes that the organization began with the preservation of Forest Green's Lake Preserve and Kilgore Falls, which is particularly near to his heart, and the preservation of the Davis property at Oakington, or Bellevue as we call it, as well as Stony Forest. So thank you, Chad, for that encouraging comment. Also, Jonathan West of Bel Air asked us to comment. He sent us an email with some comments and questions before this. So just in summary, Jonathan was asking about an open space parcel that's adjacent to the Liriodendron Mansion. For those of you that don't know this, it's been written up a bit. So if you go ahead and Google it, you can find some more information that was sold. A private landowner sold it to another private landowner, and there is some proposed development on that. But it's a great question because we get questions about this property as well as others that are proposed for development frequently. So what we do with this as well as everything else, we always look into these queries. Typically, by the time it's become a public proposal, our chances of intervening are very slim. We do reach out to those landowners and even developers, but 99% of the time, they've invested a lot of money and they're too far down the line to consider conservation. But we kind of operate in an open door fashion. We certainly don't condemn development when it's legally permissible, but we always make sure if we feel the property has conservation value, that they know what our mission is, they know what some of the options are through us, and we keep that very friendly open door posture with them, because sometimes they do want to explore it or things change. Maybe it becomes more interesting now to conserve it in their minds. So that is a good example of that type of scenario in Bel Air. And again, there's other properties just like that in other parts of the county. Scott McDaniel, who's the executive director of the Susquehannock Wildlife Society, also just commented that he thought we're doing a great job and thanks us for the work benefiting the community. So thank you, Scott, for that. We work a lot with the Susquehannock Wildlife Society and they're a great partner. And those great videos that you saw, Wild Echo Media, also owned by Scott McDaniel, he put those together. So thanks, Scott, for that. Aaron Quinley from NatureWorks said hello. NatureWorks is a great local organization that we've begun working with more. They do guided mindful walks through different natural properties. And we've actually opened up one of our private preserves to NatureWorks for that work. So thanks, Aaron, for joining us. And Billy Boniface from Hartford County Government says he enjoyed growing up in Crestwell and riding all through the Stony Forest area. And he asked about a possible trail system there. So yes, I have understood from the Forest Service that they are interested in a trail system. Some decades ago, there was logging on the new Grays Run tract of Stony Forest. So there are some historic kind of logging roads and larger areas where they would load logs on. So that kind of is the start of a trail system. So if you go out there now, you can pretty easily follow some of those. There is no map, however, so definitely make sure that you're comfortable walking in a woods of that size. But yes, there's certainly the idea for trail systems. At this point, I have not heard any commitment in terms of biking or horseback riding, but certainly for hiking. Oh, and then we have Greg Pizzuto from Visit Hartford. Great to have Greg on. Visit Hartford was a wonderful sponsor of Hartford 2020, and we're looking to bring them on for some of our 2021 events too. he asked about Bellevue Farm when it is open to the public. Again, we certainly can't commit to a date for that, so I can't say, but what I will note is, Greg, if you're interested in anyone else, back in 1994, Harford Land Trust with the county government co-authored a master plan for the Oakington Peninsula, which really set the vision for preservation of most of the peninsula for public access and preservation. And that was really what led to Swan Harbor, and also what started Harford Land Trust in our efforts to preserve Bellevue Farm. So that has some great visionary statements around forms of public access. Certainly, we're hoping that there will be some viewpoints to go out onto the coast. It's not a beach like you see in other parts of the bay. There is a large bluff there, but it makes it all the more special and different for that. But hopefully we can get out, just like at Swan Harbor, there can be some maybe access points for viewing purposes. Trails are absolutely in the works for Bellevue. There is this additional historic element that I think will take some study to figure out exactly how to celebrate that. The historic home on the property is in pretty good condition, so the plans right now are to maintain that as is. And beyond that, it's a little bit hard to say because it's early in the process. Harry Webster, our former board president. Hello, Harry. He's just giving us some kudos, so thanks so much, Harry, for all of your efforts. Oh, and John Turgeon, the Executive Director of Maryland Environmental Trust. I should give a little shout out to them. So they're one of our partners at the state level. And I think it was one of our conservation easements that we featured. We partnered with Maryland Environmental Trust, and actually 2 that we just settled in February just this week as well. So thanks, John, for joining us. Also, Mike Griffiths, one of our legislators. That's good to see you, Mike. He says, thank you for all you're doing. And he thanks you, Ben, specifically for your 8 years of service. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
And Rick Post, our former board vice president, he's tuning in from North Carolina. So hi, Rick. That's so good to hear from you. Okay, so I think I've read out the
shout out. It's good to
Go ahead, Ben.
give a shout out because I want to thank him for his long service on the board. He was vice president when I first became president, and I don't know what we would have done. I don't know what I would have done without him if he wasn't there. So I'm glad you could join us, Rick.
Well, if there's no other questions, then in conclusion, we'll just again note that this will be recorded. We'll be sharing it out via email to all of you, the direct link. It'll also be on our YouTube page, so please share this with friends and family and neighbors. Oh, and Peg Nyland. Oh, hi. I have to say hi to Peg. Peg was the executive director just before me for many, many years. So we are so thrilled to have Peg join us. Thank you so much, Peg. And our door is always open. So our email, info@harfordlandtrust.org, is right there on the screen. Also on our website, you can we provide all the contact information for all of us. So please feel free to reach out at any time. So with that, we'll stop the recording and we'll go ahead and sign off. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.